Let us continue our discussion on human health and disease. We are discussing common diseases in humans. This is the second video on this topic. We have already recorded one video where some diseases mentioned in your NCERT were explained. Now again I am telling you that we will be limiting ourselves to the diseases that have been mentioned in NCERT. It is not necessary that they have been explained in NCERT, but even if they are mentioned, then we are going to discuss some important questions regarding it. And this is our final revision before NEET time, and again I am telling you, this is the time not to go astray and have a focused approach and smart work, considering that majority of the paper, almost all paper, will be based on your NCERT syllabus. So in this video, again I have written the diseases that are mentioned in your NCERT, and let us discuss the possible questions that can be asked one by one. So the first disease is Amoebiasis. So it's a very common disease in poor and developing nations. It's a very common disease, and it is caused by a protozoan. It is caused by a protozoan, and this protozoan is Entamoeba histolytica. So this is Entamoeba histolytica. So this is the first thing that we always do in the disease, that what is the agent, and as I told you that this is a protozoan. Now I am taking this opportunity to give you a little bit extra here. Now there is a term which is called as acute diarrheal diseases. So most cases of acute diarrhea is passing of loose motions multiple times in a day, that would be called as diarrhea. Most cases of diarrhea in children is of viral origin, and generally the virus involved is a rotavirus. So please remember the name rotavirus. And ORS, oral rehydration solution, is sufficient, and the idea is that the dehydration should not develop in the child, and the child should be okay in a few days. A vaccine is also available for the prevention of the viral infection. So point number one would be rotavirus. The second thing would be, what is the difference between diarrhea and dysentery? So when we are looking at amoebiasis, so we are looking at the term which is called as amoebic dysentery. Now what is the difference between dysentery and diarrhea? So diarrhea will include, obviously there would be loose motions, but it will actually include pain abdomen. There may be some fever and blood and mucus in the stool. So these things are not common in the normal diarrhea, or I should say the uncomplicated diarrhea. On the other hand, dysentery would have, again I am telling you, pain abdomen, there may be slight fever, and obviously as I told you, that blood and mucus in the stool. So that would be dysentery, and generally the pain is colicky pain. So this is what differentiates diarrhea and dysentery. And dysentery can be amoebic dysentery, which is caused by the protozoan Entamoeba histolytica, or it can be bacillary dysentery as well. That means it can be caused by a bacterial infection, and the name of the bacteria is Shigella. So it is a very common condition in human beings. So we are coming back to the disease mentioned in NCERT. So this is the agent. Second thing that we always discuss is the mode of transmission. You can easily understand that this is fecal oral. So the route of transmission, or the mode of transmission, would be fecal oral. That means it is an intestinal infection, and it is spread by contaminated water and consumption of the food that is contaminated with ova or cyst of Entamoeba histolytica. So Entamoeba histolytica can form cyst, and the cyst can be pretty resistant. So this is the mode of transmission. Now what happens inside when it infects the intestine? It will cause an inflammation. So it will cause an inflammation of the large intestine, and that will lead to decreased absorptive capability of the alimentary canal, leading to a loss of water, which will lead to diarrhea. And please remember this name. So this is what you must pay attention to. It is a histolytica. So histo is the term for tissues. So it can invade into the wall of the intestine. Now that is the problem. It will break down the tissues that are present in the lining of the intestine, and that explains the presence of mucus and the blood in the stool. So it is a histolytica. Lysis is breakdown, histo is tissue. I hope this name will help you remember that what are the problems that are associated with it. In some cases, actually, it can be found outside the intestine as well. It can reach liver and it can form what is called as amoebic liver abscess, a dangerous condition. So it can cause amoebic liver abscess as well. Amoebic liver abscess. So all these questions can be asked in your NEET entrance exam. As I told you, a very resistant cyst can be formed, and diagnosis is by the stool examination. You can see the presence of ova and cyst in the stool. The diagnosis is pretty straightforward. So we are saying, so stool examination, ova and cyst in stool. Then obviously comes the treatment part. You will give the drugs that are used to kill the protozoans. Just remember the name of metronidazole if you can. Otherwise, it is not required. But again, you can understand that these type of drugs can be easily given to control amoebiasis, and it is controllable. But the thing is that the treatment should again be complete duration. It should be complete duration. There are many drugs available. I am just giving you an example of one of the drugs which was used historically in large number. So this is about amoebiasis. Now you can understand the questions. Obviously, there is another thing mentioned in your NCERT, that the common housefly can act as a mechanical carrier for the disease. And please remember, the prevention would be hygiene. So prevention would be hygiene and the proper sanitation. That is easily preventable. It is now rarely seen in the developed world. So I hope this disease is now absolutely clear to all of you. And let us move on to the next disease. The next disease is a helminthic infection, and this is Ascariasis. So Ascariasis is a helminth infection. It is a worm infestation of the human beings, and the name of the worm, it is a round worm. It is a nematode. The name is Ascariasis lumbricoides. So the name is Ascariasis lumbricoides. So again it is an intestinal infection. So this is the agent. The mode of transmission is again fecal oral. Now fecal oral, again you can understand, that means that by consumption of contaminated water and food, this is how it is transmitted. Now what happens is that once somebody ingest these contaminated food or water, then what happens is that this Ascariasis lumbricoides in a certain stage of its life cycle enters the intestine, and then it pierces the wall of the intestine, reaches the blood and reaches the lungs. So this actually reaches lungs, and lungs, then it lands up in the alveoli, where it can cause irritation, leads to cough. So that may be a symptom of Ascariasis, cough. And then what happens is that the pathogens are cuffed up in the sputum. They can be either thrown out, or the child may actually swallow it again. And this time when the sputum is swallowed by the child, then at a particular stage of their development in life cycle, they actually now again are reaching into the alimentary canal, and this time they get egg sheathed, and then they attach to the wall of the intestine, and they grow into the adult worms. So this is how the life cycle begins. So that means one of the common features can actually be cough, and the child may actually cough up the worms, and that may look very horrific sometimes, and but it is seen in the cases of Ascariasis. Most cases will not produce lot of symptoms. So a large population of developing and underdeveloped world are actually infested by this worm infestation, and this is the most common worm infestation in the world, most common helminth infestation of the mankind. And as I said, that most cases probably would not be showing any symptoms at all. But if the symptoms are produced, the symptoms can be there may be bleeding in the intestine that may lead to iron deficiency anemia. So there can be bleeding, there can be iron deficiency anemia, and if the number of the worms become large in the intestine, they can cause actually pain abdomen and intestinal blockage. So they are known to cause in severe cases blockage of intestine. So that is a problem, blockage of intestine. So again, as I told you, there can be cough and the child may actually cough up the worm. So these are the signs and symptoms that are associated with Ascariasis. Again, I am telling you, a very common helminthic infection, not causing lot of symptoms in majority of the infested persons. Now after understanding the clinical features, now comes the diagnosis. So diagnosis is again by stool examination. That is straightforward. You can actually see the larva, developing larvae inside in the stool examination, and that will be pretty straightforward. Again, anti-helminthic drugs are available like albendazole, and they can be actually given to take care of Ascariasis. The prevention would again be personal hygiene and sanitation. I hope the possible questions now are absolutely clear that can be asked from this topic. Now the next disease is filariasis. So filariasis is sometimes also called as elephantiasis. So although elephantiasis is a particular variant, elephantiasis. So let me get the spelling correct. And this is elephantiasis. Again, it is caused by a nematode. The name of the nematode is Wuchereria bancrofti. So this is Wuchereria bancrofti. So we are looking at the agent. There is Bruggia malae. So another nematode, Bruggia malae. There is another which is called as Bruggia timori, but please remember just two. So these are again Ascariasis nematodes. So they are roundworms. So we now know what is the agent that causes the disease. Now the mode of transmission. So the mode of transmission is it is vector borne. So mosquito is involved. So it is spread by mosquito bite. And the most common mosquito that is involved in the transmission of filariasis is actually Culex. So it is Culex. So it is a mosquito-borne disease. Now what happens is that with the bite of the female mosquito, again this is female mosquito biting the human being, taking a blood meal, what happens that in the skin microfilariae of Wuchereria bancrofti are inoculated. So with the bite of the mosquito, microfilariae of Wuchereria bancrofti gets into the skin of the human beings. From there they reach the lymphatics. So they reach the lymphatics. This is an important question. So that means they reach the lymphatics and develop into adults. And then what happens is that these adults will produce microfilariae. So we are saying in the adults, in the lymphatics, the adults reproduce and produce what are called as microfilariae, and these microfilariae come in peripheral blood or lymph. So they come into circulation, they can reach peripheral blood and lymph. In case of Wuchereria bancrofti, there is a nocturnal periodicity. This is very, very unusual. They come in the peripheral blood late in the night. So that is very unusual feature. So they have a nocturnal periodicity, and from there there is another bite by the mosquito, and mosquito picks up the microfilariae, and these microfilariae are different at larval stage. The larval stage develop in the mosquito, and from the mosquito a particular larval stage is again inoculated into the human being. So this is how the cycle goes. Now the basic problem is that the adult is living in the lymphatics, and we know that lymphatic system is a necessary system that returns the additional interstitial fluid back to the vascular system. So there are some ducts, if you remember, body fluids and circulation, thoracic duct and lymphatic duct opening into the vein. So they return the interstitial fluid back to the blood. It is a one-way transport. Now the problem is that if they block the lymphatics, so if these worms actually they block the lymphatics, because they are residing in the lymphatics, and we know that lymphatics are basically one-way system. Let us make it something like this. So they are one-way system, and somewhere here, let us say that the worms have blocked the lymphatics, so the distal part will have block, because of the blockage will have increased hydrostatic pressure. The fluid is not going to go back through this blockage back into the blood, and therefore the interstitial fluids get accumulated in the dependent parts, in the distal parts, and this collection of fluid in the interstitial fluid, as you know, is called as edema, and it can be actually massive sometimes, and therefore you can see the figure that is given in NCERT. The lower limbs of the affected individual shown in the NCERT are huge in size, and that is why the name elephantiasis. And another site of edema commonly involved is the scrotum. So all these things, they get swollen up, and hence the name which is called as elephantiasis. So now I hope you understand the clinical sign and symptoms of this filariasis. The diagnosis is again very simple. You know of the nocturnal periodicity, and you can actually look for the presence of microfilariae in the blood films. So simple blood films, you do what is called as a Giemsa stain, and you see the microfilariae. There are some new tests available, very exciting tests through which it can be more conclusively and early actually diagnosed rather than depending on the blood smear, but still it is a useful test to diagnose filariasis. Now after you diagnose, obviously the treatment part is easy. Again, we are looking at anti-helminthic drugs. Say for example, there are some drugs that are involved here. Let me not go into the details here. And an interesting thing is that filariasis is endemic in some pockets in India, and that includes some part of Kerala as well, and there are some prophylactic treatments can actually be done, and obviously the mosquito bite has to be prevented. That would be the preventive strategy for prevention of elephantiasis, with the usual measures that you prevent mosquito bite and you prevent mosquito breeding. That is a very common logical conclusion that you can easily derive. Now after filariasis, let us come to the next disease, which is actually called as ringworm. So ringworm can be called as, so I'm sorry for this, so let us look at ringworm. So first and foremost, please understand, it is not a worm, it is actually a fungal infection. So it is actually a fungal infection. So the agent is fungal. So the disease is sometimes called as dermatophytosis. This is the actual name, actually, not sometimes. So it can be caused as dermatophytosis, and it was also called as teniasis. So mind the spelling here. This is not Taenea, teniasis. That it is not a flat form. It is actually teniasis, and this is a fungal infection. And we know that there are three genera of fungi which are involved. One is called as epidermophyton. So we are looking at epidermophyton. The second would be macrosporum, and the third would be trichophyton. So these are the three genera of fungi which are involved, and they can cause teniasis or dermatophytosis. You can easily see that there is a question that can be likely made here: which of the following genera of the fungus do not cause ringworm? Now why is it called as ringworm? Because the lesion, the clinical feature would be a rash with itching, that would be intense itching actually, that will be seen on the skin. And what happens is that the skin would have a reddish type of rash. So I am trying to make this a different color. This would be actually red. So if you are able to see red better, let us see, there would be a red rash, and you can see the fungal hyphae. So you can see the fungal hyphae, and let us take a different shade of red, and in the periphery you can see the fungal hyphae, and you can see that this looks like a worm. this looks like a worm, and hence the term which is called as ringworm, but actually it is not a worm. It is not a worm. The sign and symptoms I have already told you. There would be intense itching, and there would be rashes and intense itching. Intense. So this is the sign and symptom. The disease is actually spread by direct contact. So that means somebody comes in the contact with the patient suffering from, shakes hands, say for example, the disease may be transmitted. Similarly, sharing the articles used by the infected person are very, very important reason for the spread of this disease. It's a fairly common disease, and there are some variants. The question can be asked, if it is tinea pedis, this is what is called as athlete's foot. So you must have heard of this condition. This is athlete's foot. This is caused by tinea pedis. There is tinea corporis on the body. There would be tinea capitis on the head, and tinea unguum. So unguum, unguum, that would be in the nail bed. Very, very difficult to eradicate. So now we know, and obviously the treatment would be antifungal drugs. So you can give creams for local application, or in severe cases systemic antifungal drugs can actually be prescribed. And prevention is pretty straightforward. The personal hygiene part is very, very important. So even using the socks of the other person, that is why athlete's foot, sometime using the razors etc. used by the person who is affected by the disease can actually spread it. So the personal hygiene goes a long way in avoiding the occurrence of ringworm. I hope this is now absolutely clear. Now we are coming to certain diseases which are not exactly explained in your NCERT but are definitely mentioned. So I will be giving just an insight, just in case any question comes from these diseases. One is the disease which is called as dengue. So it is caused by dengue virus, DENV. Now we know that there are actually 5 strains of dengue virus, and if a person is infected by one of these strains, there is lifelong immunity and there is short-term immunity for other strains. But if the person gets infected again with another strain, then the complications are very likely to occur. I hope you got this point. So this is dengue virus. It is a vector-borne disease, and we are talking about Aedes aegypti. Aedes aegypti. So this is the mosquito that actually spreads the infection, and it is the bite by this mosquito, and on its legs you can actually see white spots. So this is very easy to diagnose. I am making a very, very rough diagram. And similarly on the thorax part, there would be the presence of white spots in the form of a lyre, L-Y-R-E. It is an instrument, a musical instrument, and therefore this is easy to identify, Aedes aegypti. Now regarding the clinical features of dengue, we have talked about the agent, we know about the mode of transmission. So let us come to the clinical feature. There is a high grade fever, there is severe bone pain, and that is why it is sometimes called as break bone fever. There is retroorbital pain behind the eyes. So, and there is a rash on the body. So the basic things that we are looking for, the sign and symptoms in these cases would be a high grade fever, and we are saying there will be severe joint pains, bone pains. So it is called as the break bone fever. And also we are looking at headache, and especially the headache is behind the eye. This is called as retroorbital headache. And we are looking at a rash on the body. So there can be a rash on the body, and obviously there can be some spots, and these spots are called as petechiae. So what can happen is that similar to the mosquito bite, there can be small rashes on the body, and these rashes do not blanch on pressure, and these are called as petechiae. So this is what the dengue fever looks like. In majority of the cases it is not remarkable. That means nothing happens. In week or 10 days time the person gets well. In few cases there are two complications that are known to occur. The platelet count may go very low. The platelet count may go very low and it may lead to bleeding, spontaneous bleeding, and that condition is called as dengue hemorrhagic fever. So one of the complications would be DHF, dengue hemorrhagic fever. You know, hemorrhage means bleeding. So this is because of a decreased platelet count. A more dangerous condition is dengue shock syndrome. So dengue shock syndrome is characterized by the coming out of the fluid from the blood vessels, leading to hemoconcentration. The blood gets more and more concentrated, and there is a significant loss of the blood pressure. And I have already told you so many times that what exactly is meant by shock, and this carries a significant mortality. So two complications, one would be dengue hemorrhagic fever and the second would be dengue shock syndrome. So I hope this thing is now enough for going to the NEET entrance exam knowing about dengue, and let us move to chikungunya. So a very similar disorder caused by the chikungunya virus, again characterized by severe joint pains, fever and a rash. So fever, joint pains and a rash. Aedes aegypti, please remember this, Aedes aegypti is capable of transmitting so many conditions. We have already talked about some, but please remember yellow fever as well. And also Zika virus. So Zika virus, yellow fever, all these conditions can be spread by the bite of Aedes mosquito. So chikungunya, as I said, just remember that it is caused by chikungunya virus. So we will write it like this, CHIKV. This is the chikungunya virus, and very significant joint pains, and they can persist for a longer duration of time. This happens in chikungunya, and there is a rash on the body as well. Obviously there is high grade fever. So just remember chikungunya. NCERT also mentions something about polio. So there is something very interesting regarding polio. Please remember this, that polio is poliomyelitis. So it can be called as poliomyelitis. It is again caused by a virus. This virus is poliovirus. It is an RNA virus, and this is basically an intestinal infection. Please listen carefully. So polio is an intestinal infection. In most of the cases nothing happens. The person may have actually a few days of loose motions and nothing happens, but in around 1% of the cases it secondarily infects the nervous system. So it secondarily infects the nervous system, and then it causes what is called as lameness. This is what you know about polio. So try to keep the things in perspective. This is basically an intestinal infection, and obviously you can easily understand personal hygiene will be a very, very important method. And what happens is there is another point to mention about polio, because we ran in India a very successful pulse polio program, and the pulse polio program was intended to create herd immunity against the polio virus. So living in corona times, you must be aware about what exactly is herd immunity. The idea was to vaccinate all children below 5 years multiple times, so that they develop immunity against polio virus, and majority of the population gets the vaccine, and the disease is eradicated. So it has been removed from India. That is a very, very significant contribution. And that pulse polio program was actually based on oral polio vaccine. So as the famous cine star Amitabh Bachchan said, "Do boond jindagi ki." So this is oral polio vaccine. So this you must know about polio, because the disease has been mentioned in your NCERT. Moving on, NCERT also mentions tetanus. So tetanus is a bacterial disease. So the agent is bacterial disease. It is a bacterial disease. You know that it is Clostridium tetani. And the important thing to know about is that it is an obligate anaerobe. And the mode of transmission is through contaminated wounds. So this bacteria may be found in soil and from the wound. Actually, if the wound gets contaminated with soil, they are likely to enter into the body. Similarly, various articles which are contaminated, say for example, there are so many things that actually if somebody gets injured with these iron articles, say for example, even then if they are grossly contaminated, then they can actually transmit the spores. So that means spore formation is a very important feature. Very resistant spores are formed by Clostridium tetani. And another thing to remember would be the 3 classical signs of the disease. So they can ask you about the trismus. There is a symptom which is called as trismus, and trismus means lockjaw. So trismus is lockjaw. That gives tetanus its name as well. Tetanus is commonly called as lockjaw. So this muscle, this is a very strong muscle. This is a very strong muscle. It is called as masseter. It undergoes a spasm and the person will not be able to open or close the jaw. So that would be called as lockjaw. The second thing would be opisthotonus. So these are the terms which are very common, and therefore any medical aspirant should at least know about them. Opisthotonus is that the body is bent like an arch. Now the reason is that the muscles, the extensor muscles, these are very powerful muscles. So they go into spasm and the body is bent. And similarly, there is a peculiar facial expression which is called as rhesus sardonicus. So that will be because of the spasm of the muscles of the face. So it will give you a peculiar facial expression, and that is called as rhesus sardonicus. And obviously it is a vaccine preventable thing. We have already talked about that what exactly is a toxoid. So we give injection tetanus toxoid to prevent tetanus, and toxoid is actually a toxin that has been rendered harmless. So that has been rendered harmless. So the idea is that it should not cause the problem in the person who is getting the vaccine, but it will induce a response from the immune system. So very important it is to actually prevent tetanus, because otherwise it is a very deadly disease. So this is about tetanus. And finally in this video, an obituary, and this is about smallpox. It is one of the great victories of the science, and this smallpox was the first disease that was declared eradicated from the earth by WHO. So just an obituary for smallpox. 1980, WHO actually declared that the world is free of smallpox. That was a great victory of medicine over one of the diseases. I hope you have followed this video. Now please go and read the NCERT textbook and practice some previous year questions, and the questions if you want to do from the understanding part of the NCERT given in masterclass biology.